just a couple days ago, the Washington Post published basically, I think, a book review of Bob Woodward's new book coming out, in which Milley, the Joint Chief of Staff, the head of the Joint Chiefs, he says in there, he makes a number of claims and assertions, and there's quotations and such, that people are calling treason. People are calling, the end of the civilian control of the military. People are saying that the chain of command in terms of the nuclear strike orders, or however that works, and we're going to get into that because I have no idea, that was violated, and that there was many of the things that basically resulted in perhaps a coup. And I am no fan of Milley, and obviously, I am a Trump supporter, and I'm definitely not a Democrat, but I am a fan of rigor. Okay, and so I want to go through this and make sure that we have the facts and the law and all of the elements that are going to make this a very valid and forceful argument. Because I'll tell you, my first thought when I read this is Bob Woodward. Didn't just last year Bob Woodward come out with a book and all of us were like, Bob Woodward doesn't know what he's talking about. That Bob Woodward, he's a biased politician, or, a partisan. That Bob Woodward cannot be trusted. But now here we go. Bob Woodward's got a book that's got something in it that we want to jump on, and everybody's jumping on it like Bob Woodward has been the most reliable source that there's ever been. Isn't that weird? Do you find that a little weird?
Well, it's what the media does. I mean, I could care less about Bob Woodward. I was there with Milley, who worked for us. I was running the Defense Department, and I don't need a book to tell me the accounting of how this man acted and behaved. I saw it firsthand. I saw him, as I like to call him now, he's the Kraken of the swamp, because he's the most political figure. He's even more political than I think Nancy Pelosi is currently. I mean, this guy will say and do anything to save his job. And that's the exact opposite of what he's supposed to do. Afghanistan is the biggest example. We withdrew successfully out of Afghanistan under President Trump, and I ran his plan to do so. And then we left it in Milley and Biden's hands, and, well, the world saw what happened.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to what the Trump plan was in Afghanistan and how the difference was and how it played out. But let's go through a number of these claims, first of all. Let's talk about the I don't even know where to start. I mean, first of all, there was a time in which Milley called his Chinese counterpart and told them, quoting here, not quoting specifically, but paraphrasing, "We are not going to attack you. If we were going to attack you, I would call and tell you." Now, that when you just read those lines, that sounds insane to me, right? That this guy, who's obviously one of the highest senior military officials in the whole entire thing, is saying to one of our adversaries, "Hey man, it's all good. We're not going to attack you. And if you were, I'm going to pick up the phone and call you." Now, in this article about the book and Bob Woodward, it was mentioned that there were exercises going on, military exercises going on at the time of this phone call. So my question to you is, one, were there actually military exercises going on that China could have misinterpreted as an aggressive act? And two, if there were exercises going on as a normal standard of course, do we notify our counterparts and say, "Hey guys, this is just an exercise. We're not really mobilizing to come invade you. We're not mobilizing to come attack your ships in the ocean, etc." Is it standard practice to notify even our adversaries of us conducting what is just a military exercise and giving assurances that it is just an exercise?
Yeah, let me just set the table real quick. Those are
Please
great
do.
questions. So the law, the Joint Chiefs of Staff law, legislation passed in 1950, specifically outlines what the chairman's role is. One thing, to provide military advice to the President of the United States when asked. That's it. In the statute itself, it prohibits the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from executing any operational command authority whatsoever. It's in the law. And so that's the biggest takeaway, I think, for your audience right now, is that it is, and they're probably asking, well, why would they do that? Why would they not allow the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest ranking uniformed officer in the military, why wouldn't he have operational control of the military? They don't, because our founding fathers and our Constitution says the military is to be led by civilians. The civilian being the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. So the National Command Authority, the law that directs how we operate in war and otherwise, goes from the President to the Secretary of Defense. There is no space for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the National Command Authority. So turning to your question about this Chinese stuff, look, if he tipped off the Chinese, let's put aside the fact that it's complete insubordination of the chain of command and violating the commander in chief's obligations to execute command authority. But is this guy really going and calling China and saying, hey, we're not going to attack you, but if we do, I'm going to give you a heads up? Do you have any idea what that tells the Chinese government and their calculus on how they attack us? And I don't mean militarily, I mean cyber, I mean economically. This guy's phone calls are being recorded by the CCP. So we could probably get it from China if we want to find out what happened. That's, to me, is the biggest problem that we face, is because he jeopardized the national security of America. Okay, that's what I care about more than anything. Now let's talk about him and possible acts of treason. Yes, if he made that call and said that to the Chinese, I will tell you for a fact he did not have the authorization of President Trump or Secretary of Defense Miller or myself, because I was there working it. We did not know about the content of the call until it released in the media just recently. So no permission given, no authority given under the law. So what needs to happen is the following. Put Milley and the 15 people that are in the room, because that's another thing for your audience. It's not like a one-on-one phone call like you and me, like, hey, Jack, what's up? There's 15 people on each side of the phone call. There's guys listening in. There's people taking transcription notes. Put all 15 people under oath and ask them what was said in the call. Get the transcriptions notes. It's not classified. Give them to Congress. Let the American people read it. And if he said it, then he needs to be prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and referred to the Department of Justice for prosecution.
Heavy. What would the consequences of that be if he were called to testify or was charged and found to be guilty? What are the consequences for that kind of violation?
Well, testifying before Congress, not much. Unless he lies to Congress, then DOJ can prosecute him for lying to Congress, but this DOJ won't do anything.
Right.
Being a former federal prosecutor, it's just offensive that the bias that this Department of Justice exudes. But putting that aside, the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is a separate justice system for uniformed military officers. So it operates basically the same way any court system operates that you're familiar with. And he could be brought up on military charges, stripped of his stars, his title, his pension, convicted of a crime, and sentenced to a military prison. So same type of system. It happens in the military, and it's there for a reason, because when there's acts of insubordination and violations of the UCMJ, that's what needs to prosecute that case. Now, if there's a violation of the federal statutes outside of the UCMJ, that's for DOJ to prosecute. So he could also similarly be charged in federal court. Usually DOJ and the military tribunals talk to each other so they don't duplicate efforts. If they're going to bring charges, they'll be like, you do it or you do it. We're both not going to do it. Beau Bergdahl is a perfect example of that.
Are there any examples from recent history of a serviceman, violating these laws and being prosecuted?
Yeah, Beau Bergdahl. So if you
could
remember,
you explain that one? Yeah, that one I don't know.
Sure. So 4 or 5 during the Obama administration, if you recall, we did the Bergdahl prisoner swap, where President Obama gave up 5 Al-Qaeda Taliban officials that were in Guantanamo facing military tribunal. He literally gave them up, and we can get this later. 4 of those guys are now running the Taliban in Afghanistan. We'll get to that. And Beau Bergdahl was a U.S. Army soldier who deserted his platoon while in duty in Afghanistan and then went missing for 3 or 4 years. My guys that I used to work with went and looked for Beau Bergdahl after his desertion. Some of them were killed in the process of doing that. But that's what the United States military does. We don't leave any man behind. We go get him. I'm not complaining about the mission. But what happened was, when Beau Bergdahl was finally transferred back to America and rescued as a result of this prisoner swap, he faced prosecution in the UCMJ court tribunal system. He had violated a military order of desertion, which is the worst thing you can do, basically, is leave your fellow service members in the field of duty. So he was charged and sentenced to that. And the Department of Justice had a concurrent case on that under federal law that they could have prosecuted, but they chose not to. And I forget the results. Bergdahl was convicted and then, stripped of his status and things like that. But I don't think he served much of a prison sentence, if any.
What about the Manning case? Is Manning Chelsea Manning?
Same thing. Yes.
Thing?
He was prosecuted under the UCMJ military tribunal, convicted, sentenced to court, and then given a commutation or pardon by Obama for literally being a spy.
Right. Would you call Milley a spy?
I would call him a political hack. Spy's too much of a compliment for someone like that.
Right. One technical question on the nuclear launch, like just the way that it works. Let's just, because we were talking about this on Tim Pool last night, and neither one of us really know what we're talking about on this subject. So we're just like, I don't know. Do you know? Do you know? I don't know. I was like, I'm talking to Kash Patel tomorrow. I bet he knows. So let's say that the president, God forbid, wants to launch a nuclear strike. What happens between the time that those words come out of his mouth and the time that the missile comes out of the silo? Like, where does that chain go? And is Milley in there anywhere?
No. So again, the National Command Authority kicks in. The National Command Authority for a launch like that goes from the president to the Secretary of Defense. And I'm limited a little bit in what I can talk about, but let me sort of couch it in one of the roles I had at the White House when I was on the National Security Council. Everywhere the president goes, the nuclear football goes with him. It's not a secret, right? It goes with him, so America is prepared anywhere the commander-in-chief is to execute a strike or defend our border against some type of attack, nuclear or ballistic missile or otherwise. It also goes with the Secretary of Defense. Where it does not go is with the chairman. He's not in the command authority of the nuclear strike response. He's prohibited from doing so. Now, he should give the president advice on whether or not it's a good idea. 100% agree. That's his role. He needs to do that and be in the conversation. But basically, I was the one responsible for traveling with the president and providing advice from the White House National Security Council perspective. There's military advice, then there's the president. There's very few people that basically get chucked in a room with the football. And let's say the president says, okay, we're being attacked or we have to do X, Y, or Z. The command authority goes from him to the Secretary of Defense to what we call STRATCOM, Strategic Command, out west in Offutt. And basically, we run so many cycles, so many reps and sets. We prepare for every eventuality that these guys, these awesome guys, and I went through a demo with them, know exactly what to do. And it's just a tick-tock that just goes, the chain of command, it just goes literally, it's like a zipper. It just goes boom, right down the pipeline.
Right.
And these guys execute it with great efficacy. And there is no place for the chairman and the Joint Chiefs to interject.
I guess when you're growing up, you have this idea that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is like top dog, that he's got all kinds of authority and that he's somebody that wields a great deal of power. It sounds like he's pretty impotent, actually. He's an advisor. He's just in the room to just chair.
Yeah, and I don't want to diminish the role. Like the Joint Chiefs operation is huge, massive, massive operation in the Pentagon, full of lots of uniformed officers. And basically, they are constantly providing advice, not just to the White House, but to the National Security Council, but also to their combatant commands. Basically, how the world's broken up is in these things we call combatant commands, geographic locations. You guys have heard of Indo-PACOM or CENTCOM or AFRICOM. That's just geography that breaks up the world and how we operate in those separate theaters. Those guys are constantly reporting back to the Pentagon, not just the Office of Secretary of Defense, but also the Joint Staff, because they're formulating plans and operations and helping us come up with the best solution. So it plays an important role. And the chairman is in the Oval, or should be in the Oval on a weekly basis, advising the president on military matters. And look, I was with Milley in the Oval a lot, talking about Iran, talking about China, talking about Russia, talking about hostages. And I don't ever recall a situation where General Milley said, wow, I disagree with President Trump. And he would have if he did. But he agreed with the withdrawal plan in Afghanistan, President Trump's policy towards rescuing American hostages, taking out terrorists, our stance against Iran, which was the strongest one, which hopefully someday we'll be able to talk about. But he was there providing his advice and doing his job. Now, what I've come to learn is he would leave the Oval and undercut the commander-in-chief and make sure he inserted himself into the chain of command. And that is unlawful.
Right. So that's the part where he made everybody look him in the eye and be like, if you get these orders, you come to me first. Right. Like that is circumventing the chain of command. That's rewriting the law. That's changing the way that the whole thing works. That to me seems obviously like a major concern. Now, in your experience in working with Milley in all these other circumstances, and I think you just alluded to it, did you ever get the notion that he was being insubordinate or being treasonous or I mean, these are big words to throw around. I realize we're just like chatting on YouTube, throwing around words like this that have such insane, ramifications and context. But did you ever have any inkling that he wasn't executing the president's orders, that he wasn't, or not, because he's not executing president's orders, but that he was subverting them somehow or getting in the way or being a problem on any other matters? Or was it just this particular one? And, what do you make of him doing it in this case, if that's the situation?
Well, honestly, as a career government guy for 16 years, you grow to respect the chain of command and the people that are in it. So when you first engage with these folks, you think it's, wow, what an awesome responsibility to be with these guys, and hopefully they're doing their job, and you entrust them that they are. And it's kind of like, maybe it's the inappropriate or not the best analogy, but when Devin and I were running Russiagate and we first started saying that a Democratic Party paid the Russians and foreign intelligence officers to go after an American president, people thought, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you talking about? It took us a year to get that narrative even going, and turned out we were right, tragically, because I didn't want it to be true. Right. I didn't want that to happen in America. Now, fast forward to the chairman, same thing. I worked with the chairman. I was the senior director for counterterrorism the night we did the Baghdadi strike. I was in the Situation Room with him and the president. And on that night, I'll be the first to admit, the chairman executed his role great, tremendous. And I was like, that guy's doing his job. That was my first heavy communications with the chairman. And then it changed once I went into the intelligence community and once I went over to the DOD. Unfortunately, I did see him start acting and calling people he doesn't need to be calling. Especially if I know he was calling Nancy Pelosi and she was calling him. I don't know the exact contents of those conversations, but if the reporting in the book is true and they're talking about changing the nuclear command code, I mean, wow. Like, you can't make this up, and you hope it's not true, because that cripples America's national security, politicizes it. And so I've seen this sway from the Baghdadi strike to now we're talking about him saving America. That's not the job of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm sorry. America's not supposed to know your name. You're not supposed to be in the spotlight. And that's what he's changed. And I know people that are still in the chairman in the Joint Staff's office, and they are infuriated with his leadership.
Interesting. I wonder why. I wonder what it is about this particular circumstance that would make him behave in a way that was inconsistent with his past behavior.
To save his job. Look, this administration, it's no surprise, hates everything Donald Trump did, including successfully have a plan to withdraw out of Afghanistan. And we handed them that blueprint, even though Blinken testified to the otherwise. Look, it's one thing if he doesn't want to read it, and those guys didn't want to read it or meet with us when we requested, and we were transitioning over government, and they said we were being political, but separate matter. It's just everything we did, they could not come to grips with, like, even if it succeeded. And what I said to them was on the way in, I said, look, take it, call it the Biden plan. I don't care, because if you guys execute this, America wins. Right. And that's what I care about.
That's what makes you so great, dude. I don't think you got an ego in this thing at all. You just want to do your job and do the service to America and see things executed with fidelity according to our laws and constitutions. I mean, that's our constitution. That's fantastic. I admire that in you.